Hi, I'm Maureen Curis with the Gentle Passage Doula Collective. I was going to say a gentle kind of doula. We are here on a different kind of doula, and I'm here with my co-hosts Kathleen Putnam and Colleen Hughes. And we are so excited today to have Julia Karnes, Director of Operations for BK Books. Barbara Karnes has been our guide on the side. She hasn't even known us, but once I discovered her when I first stepped into doing end of life work, she became like my just walking with me through the journey, just whispering in my ear everything I read that she put out. Her blue book, which is the hospice go-to book. There's so much richness to the work and the value that she shares with all of us that work in the end of life fields, but all people that are at end of life or facing end of life or caregivers. I just gave this to my neighbor to give to his mom, who is, in the final months with his dad. So I'm going to turn this over to Julia Carnes, and we can't wait to have the conversation with you, Julia. Thanks for
Oh,
coming.
I'm so glad to be here and also to be with some doulas, which is fantastic. I don't know if you read Barbara's blog last week, but one of the things that she's really a proponent of is to find well-educated end-of-life doulas who can work in tandem with a hospice to give families to fill the gaps that hospice is being so tied down, and unable to be with families like end-of-life doulas can be. There's a lot of working together that would be really beautiful.
Julia, I was a hospice nurse for a 3-year period in the late 90s. And I've been a hospice volunteer. I've later on in my journey, but as a hospice nurse, I had an hour to go in to
That's
see
a
the person, to adjust medication, educate the
uh,
family, and then it was moving on to the next one. And when I first heard of death doulas, like I had no idea until I met one of the gals in our collective, and I thought, what a great companion to hospice. This fills the gaps, like you were saying. And when we wanted to stay so much longer, and oftentimes did, and we still had to move on to our next patient. So doulas are a great, great companion and complement to the hospice team, in my opinion.
so interesting because um, the stories that I know about Barbara in her early years, I mean, she was bedding down on the floor with clients who were alone and didn't have a caregiver at the time. And there, there was a lot of end-of-life doulaing in the early days of hospice. That's what it was.
Yes.
How does
When she,
Barbara speak to the changes of hospice over time?
Well, she was in those early conversations when Medicare wanted to come in and draw up restrictions, and she hated it, but she understood why, because they wanted um, a, a, they wanted to know that these are well-educated, knowledgeable, because they were paying for it. Insurance was, they wanted to pay, they wanted that. Um, Over time, the restrictions have gotten such that hospice nurses, well, as Maureen said, have an hour with a patient, maybe twice a week. And then when active dying happens, usually get an hour and a half. And that's oftentimes, you can come a few days in a row. But they can't stay after a death, which is really sad. That's such a vulnerable time for families, and that they have to leave to go to the next uh, patient and family, that's very disturbing. That's not what the hospice philosophy was. It was to be with the dying patient at the time of death, and then afterwards, and to support the family, and also with bereavement. There was a lot of bereavement support that doesn't get paid for by Medicare. So it's usually, hey, hope you're doing okay. Let us know if you need anything. And that's not the support our families need, as you all know.
Julia,
Yes.
I've been, of course, Gone from My Sight. The Little Blue Book is very famous. I read that it's like over 35 million copies have been published so far. It's just amazing to me, and it's such a beautiful book. I was just wondering, it's back in 1985. What happened that Barbara started writing these things? I mean, the changes. I mean, and how did, now that it's in everybody's office, social workers, physicians, how did people, I mean, how did professionals respond to it? I mean, what happened? How did this evolve?
That's such a great question. So, Barbara gets into hospice at a time when many were dying of AIDS. That was most of the census were mostly youngish men alone. And it was so scary that usually families were afraid to even come and visit their loved one. And so there were just two hospice nurses, and either she would be there or her partner, and they would trade off. And she was seeing that there was a commonality in all of these, the dying process with all of these people. And so about 3 years into her hospice experience, she gets a call, and it was at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the family calls at home, calls Barbara and says, I think mom's dying now. And talking to the family about the symptoms, Barbara knew that she wasn't imminently dying, but if she didn't get out of bed and go to the family, that she would be meeting the family at the emergency room sometime tomorrow morning. So she went to the family, and she's actually sitting on the bed of the patient, and the whole family is over here, and the daughter is listening to Barbara and taking copious notes. And Barbara said, wow, what's wrong with this picture? She should be reading something. She should have support when I'm not here. She should have something to rely on that says, this is what's happening. This is normal. This is what you can do. And that was on a Thursday. Over the weekend, she got out her yellow legal pad, and she wrote Gone from My Sight. And then she typed it and she mimeographed. I don't think you guys even know what mimeographing is. That was even before Xerox. Yeah. Oh, you do? And so she mimeographed it. She took it into the head of the hospice, and she said to him, I wrote this, and I want to give it to you, and we can mimeograph copies and staple it and give it to all of our patients and families. He takes it, he reads it, calls her in at the end of the day, and he goes, yeah, I don't think we need this. We've got you and your part. You just give that when you want to give that. And she was stunned. And she went home and she mimeographed her copies, and she was taking them to her families. And one day, about 6 months later, Jack, her husband, who recently died, Jack meets her at the door when she comes home, and he goes, some people in California want your mimeographed copies of what's happening when people are dying. And she goes, who is it? And it was a few hospice nurses who had met at a conference and said, well, there's this woman in Kansas City, and and so they put it into a little booklet, and that began the Little Hospice Blue Book
Wow.
all those years ago.
So that was in the 80s.
That was in the 80s. I think it was 84.
What a gift. That's when I started my nursing career, is 84. And we were lucky because we had an inpatient hospice team that would come visit our oncology patients. And I never worked anywhere again that had an inpatient hospice, but they were volunteers. But what a great gift. That would have been so great to have, even for people dying in the hospital. Wow. Just
Yeah.
amazed. So how did she follow up her books? I mean, she'd gone from my site, must have been obviously her first. And
Right.
then did she just
So
see it?
in the late 90s, she noticed that with the restrictions that were starting to come down from the Medicare regulations, she realized that more and more families were going to be alone when their loved one was dying. And she said, okay, so I'm writing the blue book, and that is signs of approaching death, what's normal, what you should look for, talks about food and all of that. And that's when she wrote the larger book, The 11th Hour. And this is the days to hours to minutes and after, and then the ritual bath and all of that. And she wrote that to support the families because she knew, you're going to be alone. And this is how I hope to support you. This is what you can do. And she talks about when she decided to write it, she rushed to a family's house and everyone was around the bed. And they were standing and they were just holding their hands and they didn't know what to do. And that's when she thought, I can tell them, get in bed with dad, hold dad, talk to him. He can hear you, all of those things. And that's how the 11th hour came about. And when her parents, well, actually her stepfather and her mother were diagnosed with lung cancer within 4 months of each other. And she really wanted her stepfather to eat a little more, to take better care of himself after he got his diagnosis. So she wrote A Time to Live, living with life-threatening illness. And she said, Dawn, would you edit this for me? And by doing that, she got the information to him because he did a lot of intense treatments and he died 14 months prior to his wife, who was also diagnosed, and she went on hospice. And she was on hospice for about a year. So
Was it back when they could stay on hospice for a year? Because
well, she was declining.
right.
And as long as you're declining, you can stay on hospice. It's when you don't lose enough weight, when you're not having trouble eating, when you don't need the care. Yes. And Barbara moved her into her home.
In the early days before Medicare got so involved,
Yes.
and it used to be a year life expectancy or less, I recall. But when I worked for him, it was the late 90s and Medicare was already regulations were in place. And
Yes. Right now, I believe the average hospice stay is 18 days, which is,
well, that's up from what I thought it was. I thought it was 8 to 12.
well, most are coming in with a couple of weeks left. That's true. but they do also get people who are well educated on end of life and hospice care. And so I guess that lengthens that statistic.
I'd love to hear anything that was a big surprise to you in working with Barbara, or her biggest surprises that has come up.
Wow, that's a great question. I can't really speak for her, but I'll tell you something. So I came about in the little family-owned company when I had friends whose parents were getting sick and dying. And at the time, this was within the last 10 years, there are hospices now that don't educate. They don't use any kind of resources. And these friends of mine, I said, well, of course they gave you the little blue book, right? So you know what's going on. And they were like, what does that mean, little blue book? And I heard it enough times that I went to Barbara and I said, regular people need to be able to find these resources, and they're so affordable. We need to get these available and for people to know. And she goes, that would be really good, but I don't know how to do that. And I said, well, I don't know either. And so I said, but I'm going to try. And that's when I started trying to do a lot of outreach and social media and put out her information with the hopes that I was going to help people. And I'll tell you, it gets me up in the morning every day. The world feels a little hard right now, and we're going through, an election year. And this is what feeds me. In addition to that, by coming in and working with her and working in the office, my zest for life, which I thought I had a pretty good zest for life, it's even more pronounced. I love life. I live life so much bigger since I've learned about dying. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's the biggest surprise to me. It's like, this is finite, this little piece of life, and I just want to seize the day much more. That's been a surprise for me.
Thank you.
You know, Julia, her film, her video on new rules for end of life
Yeah.
is truly one of the things that impacted me the most. I play it for a group of people who are terminally ill. I teach a class for Cancer Lifeline. And I remember a gentleman was very, very cynical, and I didn't think he was going to last. And I show it the second time in the course. It's a 6-week course, and I show it the second week. And his hand went up in the middle of the film. I just think Barbara is a tremendous teacher. Okay. I mean, I've been in education, I'm a nurse, education for a long time. And I just think he is just quintessential educator. And his hand went up in the middle. I said, oh, okay, I'll handle him at the end. And I called on him and I said, so do you have something to share about the film? And he said, one word, excellent. He didn't make it through the course. He died about the 4th week of the course, but he attended. And I will never forget that. And every single person there, I have a class usually about 15 people, which is really almost unheard of at Cancer Lifeline. Have people, this class about dying, and they're there. And they all said, well, nobody's ever told us what it's like. I wanted you to hear that story because his words will stay with me forever. Excellent.
The curmudgeon.
Yeah.
And that could have been fear talking also,
Yes.
his resistance to.
Yes, true.
That's really powerful to hear. I can't wait to share that with her tomorrow. It was, we have no idea how um, Bill and Melinda Gates got a hold of New Rules and took it to open the Global Health Festival. I believe I'm correct in saying that, in London, and apparently introduced it by saying anyone who's going to die needs to watch this film. And it was so powerful to us. It's like, oh my God, wow. And it's, yeah. I took it, friends of mine, their father had been diagnosed with kidney disease. And I would see his daughter every couple of weeks, and they had said he had about 2 years, and she was saying, well, he's not eating so much. And we talked about that a little bit. And a couple weeks later, she said, well, the other day, he always goes to play cards at the senior citizen, and he's not going. He didn't want to go. And I was like, clock that. And a couple weeks later, he had dropped a lot of weight. And she said, he's dropping a lot of weight. I think I need to push his food a little more. And I said, Julie, can we all get together, and I'd love to show you a film. Grandchildren, children, uncles, and an aunt, and we all watched it. And they were like this, and as it went along, their shoulders released, and they were crying and holding each other. And it ends, and I'm just sitting there. I don't know what I ought to do. I'd never done that. And Julie turns and she goes, we got to be making some decisions, because I don't think Dad's going to make it another 2 years. And he died less than a month later. But they did all of these beautiful things together. And the grandchildren, they were visiting him, they were taking him things after school. It was a very sacred, precious time, because they just didn't know. They didn't know. And I didn't know how to make them read something, but I know that the youngsters, they like visual, they like watching videos. And I thought, I think this is my best bet, because I didn't think he only had a month. I thought, well, maybe 6 months. But it's a tool that I wish more people had. I think it would help so many.
It gave them permission to live life to the fullest. And I think that that's what this does. And I love that you brought the kids, the grandkids, and the grandkids were involved, because so many people fear telling their children or don't want their children involved in this beautiful, sacred time of life. And all that does is feed the fear. So, what I do love about her films, her books, is that it encourages us all to live life. It's not about dying, it's about living till the last moment. And what a gift that you gave that family, and what a gift all of this is to the world, because it takes the fear away. Knowledge is such a powerful thing. And that's why with my neighbor last night, I know his dad, he's like, well, he's hoping to make it till September for his wife's 80th birthday. I'm like, let me give you all this stuff. And you guys watch it. And I have the Vimeo, is that a Vimeo version
Yes.
of the New Rules? But yeah, his dad's so open to the whole journey, open to experiencing the end of his life. So it's going to be well received. But what a gift to give people.
Yeah. It's like it almost gives them some sort of power back. It's like, okay, this is going to happen. All right, I can face that. But if they have the fear, they're more reticent to be in life. Well, as Barbara says, knowledge reduces fear, and that's what you guys do. That's what you do every day. You have a course on that. That's amazing. And does that happen through a hospital, your course?
It's an organization in Washington. It's called Cancer Lifeline, and they support all kinds of people with terminal illness, cancer, and the hospitals are joined in with that educational component. And they have these big booklet of classes and everything. And I was very fortunate to get on board, and Maureen's taught for them, and Kathleen, and so we've been involved with that. But I'm always amazed. I learned so much dealing with people who are actually facing their mortality sooner than later. And the questions are amazing. When do I stop chemo? Should I stop? I mean, there's just all kinds of things about quality of life. And Barbara's writings are, in fact, I have volume 1 and 2 of Knowledge Reduces Fear. It's 2 of my favorite books
Yeah.
Oh,
because she does
wow.
this question and answer thing, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I love when she does that. When somebody emails her something and she's like, a lot of people are going to need to know this. And then she writes the answer and shares it. That's just fantastic. So helpful.
Her
Yes.
blogs, I mean, just her blogs, I've sent those on to so many people, like, oh, I know someone that needs to hear this right now. And so the fact that we can get these beautiful blogs, people don't know about them, but then we can disseminate them out to the world for people that should know. And whether you're dying at this moment or not, or whether you have a loved one that's dying at this moment or not, they're just such great information. Like how you said, Julia, that you just got so excited that you live life to the fullest anyway, but you're doing it more so now than before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Seizing the day. Absolutely. Um, it's got to be exciting for you all to be in a position. Exciting isn't necessarily the word, fulfilling what you're doing with your life every day. That's huge. That's huge, supporting people at such a vulnerable time. And that you are interested in resources and tools to support these people. There are doulas and then there are doulas, and you're clearly the doulas. You know?
We are passionate about spreading the word about the difference it makes in someone's end of life if you step forward and embrace that it's happening, and we can help educate them to take the fear away.
Are you all, have you found an openness with hospices in your area? Oh, yes, you have.
Mixed bag.
Mixed
Yeah.
bag. Okay.
Yeah.
There's one hospice that really wants to know how to integrate doulas, but that's a conversation for another time.
Okay.
Because we need to ask people I ask you, how can people learn about Barbara Karnes and Barbara Karnes books and the wonderful work that you've done, really promoting her to the world? You've been
Oh,
amazing, Julia.
oh well, thank you. Um, Everything about Barbara is on her website, and that's bkbooks.com, barbarakarnesbooks.com. So BK Books, and she has an Instagram handle, and that's Barbara Karnes RN. And she has a Facebook page, professional page, where she puts a lot of stuff there, and that's Barbara Karnes RN also. And then LinkedIn. She has a Twitter page, but it's interesting. People don't tweet a lot about death. And so we haven't really focused there very much. We're
Especially
mostly,
in an election year, right?
especially there's a lot of other noise happening these days.
Well,
But she answers all of the emails that she gets. And if anybody ever wants to contact her, writing Barbara Karnes at bkbooks.com, and she answers every email. Sometimes she'll ask, may I use this as a blog? Because I think other people are experiencing what you're experiencing. Some people say yes, some people need privacy with it, and that's cool. All of her Instagram messages and comments and all of that, she answers. We do it together, and Facebook and LinkedIn. So just trying to get people some support.
Thanks for
Well,
what you
thank
do.
you so much for what you do. It's been great having you on today.
Oh, it's
And
been a joy.
we're the Gentle Passage Doula Collective. So we will see you next week on a different kind of doula. Bye-bye.
Thank you.